It's the German Armed Forces' most powerful towing vehicle. The HX81 is a truck-sized off-road vehicle. With 680 horsepower and its 8-wheel drive, it can cope with any terrain. It's over 10 meters long and weighs 23 metric tons. With a semi-trailer, it can transport tanks of all kinds. Its permissible gross combination weight is then 130 metric tons. It has a top speed of 89 kilometers per hour. Only it can recover and transport the biggest and heaviest tanks. The HX81 is built in Vienna. Everything about the assembly line is slightly bigger.
This is the biggest engine, a V8 with 500 kilowatts and an output of 2,700 Newton meters. That's really big.
The Colossus is equipped with 2 cable winches, each of which can pull 25 metric tons, or a bit more if need be. With so much pulling power, the winches can only be tested individually.
That would be 2 times 25 to 26 metric tons with overload, or 52 metric tons. Our ground anchors can't withstand that.
The German Armed Forces call it the Elephant. The Austrian Armed Forces call it the Heavy Load Transport System 70 tons. The Tank Battalion 14 in Wels, Austria, has also recently been kitted out with the mega towing vehicle.
The recovery tank's now been positioned properly so I can put it on with 2 cable winches. The turret will now be slewed to the 6 o'clock position and lashed down. That's the transport position.
Its task is to transport and recover heavy equipment. Everything about the HX81 is bigger and stronger than on any other towing vehicle. Vienna. Motor vehicles have been developed and produced here for over 100 years. Around 1,300 men and women work at this plant.
We produce around 2,000 to 2,500 trucks a year. That includes the military model series HX, the Elephant, of which we produce around 25 to 50 units a year. Its main markets are Australia, the Austrian Armed Forces, and the German Armed Forces.
And this is what it looks like, the HX81. It has a maximum crew of 3. It's 10 meters 33 long and 2 meters 50 wide. At its highest point, the vehicle measures a whopping 3 meters 30. The HX81 is a heavy load transporter with all-wheel drive on 4 axles for the harshest of terrains. The heart of the HX81 is its V8 diesel engine. This unit has a displacement of 16.3 liters and an output of 680 horsepower. The heavy-duty transporter can cope with gradients of up to 60 degrees. Its top speed is cut off at 89 kilometers per hour. Its tanks can hold 840 liters of diesel. The engine's cooler is located behind the cab in a major assembly unit. It's better protected there, and the vehicle also has a steeper angle of approach and departure. The special feature of the HX81 is the 2 cable winches behind the cab. Each has a tensile force of up to 25 tons, enabling the HX81 to pull tanks or other heavy vehicles that have become stranded off-road onto its trailer. The Hessen-Kaserne in Wels in Upper Austria's Alpine foothills. This is where the Austrian Armed Forces Tank Battalion 14 is stationed.
We have 48 main battle tanks that are split into 3 tank companies, and then we have a tank reconnaissance unit also in the headquarters company, which takes us up to a total of 48 main battle tanks.
And so that they can be deployed faster, the HX81 replaced its predecessor in 2021, something that was urgently necessary.
It was significantly lighter, and the towing vehicle was no longer able to cope with the weight of the Leopard. That's why we decided on this system, which the Austrian Armed Forces call the Heavy Load Transport System 70 metric tons. That means that a payload of up to 70 metric tons is possible.
Sergeant First Class Mario Schmidthaler drives the heavy load transporter in the tank battalion. He's covered several thousand kilometers with the new towing vehicle. He can only drive on public roads with a military police escort. With a length of over 23 meters, his tractor-trailer combination is simply too big. Today's job is to take a tank to a presentation.
We have to collect an M88 recovery tank from Grossmittel and take it to the military academy in Wiener Neustadt because its lieutenants stay there. There's a big ceremony and we have to deliver the tank there.
2 drivers are always needed to drive the vehicle. With the semi-trailer, the unladen vehicle-trailer combination already weighs 60 tons, and it can carry a payload of another 70 tons. On the freeway, the HX81 reaches a maximum speed of 89 kilometers per hour. Back in Vienna, 6:30 a.m. on a Monday morning. A truck from the sibling plant in Munich has delivered the heavy axles for the vehicles. Because several vehicle models are built at the same time in the plant, sufficient axles always have to be in stock for each one. 3 giant high-bay storage facilities are available for this, with space for more than 300 axles. Cycle 1 marks the first step of vehicle construction, the chassis. The base frame is constructed from 2 10-meter-long steel beams. Once both parts have been bolted together, the chassis number is stamped into the frame. From now on, it's clear that this frame is going to be an HX81 heavy load transporter. Where which bolt goes is marked on the frame. The numbers specify the length of the bolts. That's important because no 2 frames in succession are identical.
There are various models, such as a mixed 81, with armor or without armor. That's why they all have different frames and dimensions, so my colleagues have to stick to the dimensions, and that's why they always put a mark on them.
The axles are assembled next in line 3, the assembly line for the HX81. They come to the assembly line from the high bay warehouse in front of the shop. First, the axles are placed in the correct position and sequence on the floor. The heavy load transporter is equipped with 4 axles, all of which are permanently driven. Instead of 4-wheel drive as found on road-going SUVs, this is referred to as 8-wheel drive. 4 axles, 8 wheels, all driven, built for maximum off-road capability. Then the chassis is raised and set down onto the axles from above. The employees need a crane for almost every operation step, because the components for the HX81 are simply too heavy. Once the frame is above the axles, it's carefully lowered and mounted. More components are added to the chassis in 4 further cycles. The truck's giant substructure is then transported into the first spray booth. This too is done using a crane, because the chassis and its axles alone already weigh 9 tons. The first coating is a light brown primer. This is done manually by 2 painters. They apply around 18 liters of paint. It takes them an hour just to prime the giant frame. In the next step, the chassis is then painted green, matte green. To do this, the chassis is suspended and moved through a total of 8 different chambers until it is dried completely in the final one at 80 degrees Celsius. Then the chassis can finally be fitted with its gigantic 673 centimeter tires on steel wheels. These tires are used exclusively by the German and Austrian armed forces. Due to different weather conditions, Australia fits different tires on its vehicles. Each wheel weighs around 250 kilograms and can only be positioned using lifting equipment. Now fully painted, the chassis then continues its journey on its own wheels. However, without an engine yet. The chassis is now ready for the assembly line after painting. But there are still almost 8,000 components to go before the vehicle is completed. New small parts have arrived in the warehouse one shop further on. Each day, up to 20 truckloads of bolts, seals, covers, and other components are delivered. All of the parts are put into 4 high-bay storage facilities to prevent them from piling up. This job is performed by 2 shuttle robots. Each hour, they store up to 200 individual parts on the shelves and retrieve the components needed on the assembly line at the same time.
Incoming goods are registered. The small parts warehouse then assigns a space, and when a call-off comes from production stating that a specific part is required, it's automatically retrieved. The employees package it, forward it to a transport truck, and then it's delivered.
This ensures that only those parts needed in the next few minutes are available on the assembly line. Small trailers are used to transport the parts to the assembly line. Each trailer only carries parts for exactly one vehicle in precisely one assembly station. All parts that are too large for the high bay storage facility are packed onto the delivery trucks by hand in the picking warehouse. The right timing is important. A part must never be missing on the assembly line. Otherwise, in the worst case, the entire production process can be delayed.
So that the employee has exactly what he needs for this vehicle that he's just building, no more, no less.
That's why each trolley has a visual identifier, so that the employees can tell where the trolley has to be positioned and when.
This has to be available at 8:17 a.m. So at 8:15 a.m. at the latest, he leaves here and places it ready for cycle 1 in the cab construction area.
The cab construction area is where the truck cabs are pre-assembled. The cabs for the Elephant arrive prefabricated from a sibling plant. Once they arrive, they're checked for transport damage. They only proceed on their assembly journey through the plant if they're fault-free. Up to 32 cabs can be buffered in the high bay storage facilities. If a tire is missing, a replacement is available in the plant. But there is always only one cab per vehicle. First, the previously primed cabs are prepared and sanded for painting. The employees then seal all hems and edges with silicone, because the cab has to be watertight later on. The cab is then primed a second time and finally painted in the color required by the customer.
Priming takes 45 minutes. 2 hours are needed for drying.
Change of location, Unterlüss, Germany. The protected cabs for the armored HX81 are built in this small place. Internally, the German armed forces refer to this as Elephant Protected. It's the Elephant's big strong brother.
Our vehicles are designed for diverse threats. Firstly, the threat of mines, but also ballistic threats that our protected cab has to withstand.
The HX81 consists of a modular system and can be upgraded with ease. An unprotected Elephant can be exchanged for a protected version within less than 10 hours. The vehicle remains the same. That means it can be adapted depending on the operating location and threat scenario when it's deployed. Protecting the crew is top priority. It all starts with the delivery of the armor steel sheets. Due to security reasons, nobody is permitted to know how thick they really are. A laser cutting system is used to cut out the individual segments. Later on, when they're assembled, these form the cab. All components have been designed for special protection requirements and are far stronger and heavier than in the unprotected version. That makes the cab more resilient and protects against projectiles, mines, and IEDs.
In this process, the belt grinder is now used to produce this chamfer that we need for a weld seam further on in the welding process.
Later, these steel blocks will be the brackets for the protected driver and passenger doors. To do this, they're milled from the solid material. Weld seams are deliberately foregone, making them better able to cope with stresses later on in action. The cab's floor and side panels are also bent at numerous points, not welded. This is done in a bending press that presses the plates into the right shape with a force of up to 400 tons. Next, the plates are mounted on support fixtures. These frames act as templates and make sure that the parts are in the right position during tack welding and aren't assembled skewed. An employee now sets spot welds. These are only intended to initially fix the construction in position. Once the floor panel, side panels, front and rear panels are ready, everything is assembled to form a cab in the geometry station. The shape of the cab is slowly emerging.
You can already see the floor with the corresponding front frame and the side panels that have already been positioned.
A robot only performs the welding work in the next station once the cab is complete. It now finishes off all of the seams and transforms the cab into the occupant's life insurance if they're attacked with firearms or explosives. The robot welding process takes almost 6 hours per cab. A couple of areas that the robot can't reach are subsequently welded by hand. To do this, the cab is always turned so that the employee can weld in a safe position.
We are only allowed to weld from above or from the side. For example, the welder mustn't weld overhead, which is where the cab is turned to the appropriate position.
After the welding process, the cab's dimensional accuracy and manufacturing tolerances are measured using a laser, so that all of the components can be fitted without problems later on in final assembly.
Here I have a laser beam that hits the cab and goes back to the device. And this device communicates with my tracker. When I move it along here, it's transferred from my tracker to the laptop. And then I have a 3D model of my cab on the laptop.
100% inspection is possible based on the 3D models. This guarantees that all of the cabs really are of the same size, so there are virtually no tolerances. Doors and roofs are delivered pre-welded from the plant in Kassel. Together with the as yet untreated cab, the parts are the first to be transported into the paint shop. Step 1 is the blasting booth. Tiny metal balls are used to remove dirt, grease, and rust from all of the parts to prepare them for priming. Priming in light brown is carried out first, followed by painting in German Armed Forces green. Color code RAL 6031 bronze green.
When the painter activates the spray gun, the system is started. Fresh air is forced into the spray booth from above, and the overspray, the spray mist, is suctioned off downwards.
Once the cab is dry 6 hours later, it's transported to final assembly using a crane. The cab will be completed here in the assembly shop in the next few steps. This starts with gluing in the insulation and the installation of the protection kit. In the next step, the front flap is installed. The large high roof is also mounted here. The solid doors are pre-assembled at a substation. Here too, not all of the components can be shown in detail due to security reasons.
The windows really are relatively heavy. One side window weighs around 70 kilos, for example, and has to be installed with lifting equipment.
The door weighs around 160 kilograms. One door is fitted using 6 steel bolts. Then the protected cab is finished. Almost 3 tons of armor steel and bulletproof glass now offer the occupants protection against mines, firearms, and artillery shrapnel. Back in Vienna, Austria, this is where final assembly takes place. The mega towing vehicles are produced for the German and Austrian armed forces and the Australian military, among others. Especially down under, the vehicle is ordered with the automated load handling system. Instead of cable winches for transporting tanks, this system enables the safe loading and unloading of containers and modules from the protected cab. By contrast, Germany and Austria order the HX81 with what's probably the world's most powerful cable winch package for military vehicles.
A highly off-road capable truck with a semi-trailer function. Added to this is the fact that we have 2 cable winches with a total pulling power of 50 metric tons. That means we can also recover leopards in the field during deployment and pull them onto the trailer.
Back in 2018, the German armed forces made an agreement to take delivery of 137 semi-trailer trucks. Above all, the armed forces use them to transport heavy armored vehicles. There's no tank that the Elephant is unable to transport. In the final assembly shop in Vienna, the chassis have dried and been fitted with wheels after painting. Weighing around 11 tons, these heavy monsters can now only be moved using these mini movers. An employee slowly pushes the giant chassis to the next workstation. The large assemblies will now be fitted on the vehicle. First, the major assembly with the 2 cable winches is positioned. The winches are mounted behind the cab. Later, during deployment, the HX81 can recover defective tanks and drag them onto its semi-trailer. Together, the 2 winches have a tensile force of 50 tons.
You know, it's double extra large. A Leopard 2, any recovery tank, pretty much any vehicle can be towed with it.
So that each cable winch performs at 100% when it's needed, the dual winch system on all vehicles has to complete an acceptance test. This takes place in a secure area at the site in Vienna. To do this, the vehicle is secured to the ground anchor at the front and tensioned. The cable winches behind the vehicle are then secured in a second ground anchor. Before each test, the metal cables are additionally fitted with safety ropes. The cable winches can only be tested individually, never at the same time. There's a simple reason for that.
Both winches at the same time, it's too much force. That would be 2 times 25 to 26 tons with overload, or 52 tons. Our ground anchors can't take that.
The crackling that can be clearly heard when the cables are tensioned indicates the forces that occur at 25 tons of tension. Each winch can be operated from the control stand using joysticks. In extreme cases, the dual winch unit produces a tensile force of up to 56 tons. This test is passed. Both winches achieve the required 25 tons with ease. WELT, home to the Tank Battalion 14 of the Austrian Armed Forces. The HX81 has been in operation here since 2021. A special trailer is used to transport tanks. It has 7 axles, 6 of which can be steered, and its cargo area can also be widened.
When I drive on with the main battle tank, I fold out the side extensions and then I have a width of 3 meters 30. And that's the exact width of a main battle tank or a recovery tank. So everything's nice and stable up there.
The low loader is a custom production for transporting tanks. The steerable wheels can be controlled from the cab.
Then I have a remote control so I can steer the trailer independently of the towing vehicle's steering. So I can steer to the left and right, and that's a big help on a rotary where space is tight.
The entire trailer is also height adjustable. It can be lowered and raised using a hydraulic system.
I was off-road before and then I have far more ground clearance. And when I load a tank, of course, it's good if the ramp approach angle is a bit less too.
The Leopard 2A4 main battle tank. Despite weighing around 55 tons, it has a speed of over 70 kilometers per hour and a range of 450 kilometers. But when it breaks down, only the HX81 can transport it away. An important maneuver.
Of course, we practice for the worst-case scenario, but we don't really do it every day. Now we're going to be retrieved by an M88, so we're going to get ready for that.
The scenario is clear. A Leopard main battle tank has been damaged on deployment and is unable to maneuver independently. It has to be taken to a workshop as quickly as possible. To do this, the Austrian Armed Forces use the M88 recovery tank. This is produced in the USA. The US Marine Corps also uses this heavy colossus for recovery and repair missions in the field. Once the recovery tank has reached the Leopard 2, a tow bar is attached to the stranded main battle tank. The 670 horsepower M88 then tows it out of the danger zone. The HX81 has since been positioned and will now take over. The Leopard 2 is 3 meters 30 wide, as is the low loader. Precision work for the soldiers.
I can straighten it a bit with the cable winches, but there's nothing I can do if it's half a meter too far to the right, of course.
First, the approach ramps are lowered. Then the trailer has to be secured with supporting feet. Otherwise, the main battle tank would damage the trailer when it's loaded. Then the men unwind the cables of the 2 winches. In action, loading mustn't take any longer than 15 minutes. Now the Leopard can be loaded. The recovery tank positions it directly in front of the trailer. The HX81 team will now take over the main battle tank.
The recovery tank's now been positioned properly so I can pull it on with the 2 cable winches. The turret will now be slewed to the 6 o'clock position and lashed down. That's the transport position.
Now the Leopard crew has to leave the tank, and then loading begins.
It's important that the cables are crossed because then I can still steer the tank a bit.
The HX81 now pulls the main battle tank slowly onto its low loader with the 2 cable winches. In a minute, the vehicle-trailer combination will have a gross weight of 130 tons. Once it's on board, the Leopard 2 is properly lashed and secured. Finally, the loading ramps are retracted. Transport to the workshop or another operating location can start right away. To do this, the trailer is set to its transport height. Now the Leopard tow truck, as the soldiers call it, can drive to any destination in Europe by road, and thereby relocate the main battle tank quickly and safely. Back in Vienna, this is where the assembly line for the HX81 towing vehicle is located. All cabs, whether protected or unprotected, pass through the cab equipment department in the Austrian capital. First, the windows are fitted. They're inserted into rubber seals and then installed directly in the cabs. The side windows are sliding windows, but there are no electric power windows in a military vehicle. Everything here is designed for functionality, not for driving comfort. Unlike in a car, the windows are not bonded, but only clamped in place. This enables defective parts to be exchanged quickly and easily later on. This is also where German armed forces vehicles are given their Iron Cross, the mark of identification for their battle vehicles and aircraft. Next, the seats are fitted in the cab, one each for the driver and passenger, as well as a center seat. Now the high roof is also mounted on the cab. It not only contains the air conditioning system, the high roof is also equipped with a hatch. It's already prepared for what's called the carriage, a fixture on which the respective customer can mount its onboard gun later on. Once again, not all details of this assembly step can be shown due to security reasons.
Because the HX2 is a military vehicle, we're not permitted to show all of the production steps, as would be possible for a civilian vehicle, due to security reasons.
Now the front flap is mounted on the cab, but before that, it's given its company logo. The badge is stuck centrally onto the flap, and now makes the HX81 what it is, a piece of Rheinmetall. This is followed by probably one of the most important parts in every cab, the steering wheel. The bolt is tightened by hand using a torque wrench. This is a tradition in the company. Elsewhere, this is done by robots. Here, each steering wheel is installed and secured by an employee. Once the cab has arrived at the final station, it's finished. But before it's lowered onto the vehicle, the entire electrical system has to be tested for possible faults. All the cables that are fitted in the HX81 are from the in-house wiring harness manufacturer. All wiring harnesses are produced manually. Each one is a custom production. And since each model has various extras, no two wiring harnesses are identical. The cables are firmly installed in places that are no longer accessible later on, such as here in the dashboard.
This is where the multifunction display is fitted, meaning our speedometer, with the rev counter, temperature, and fuel gauge. If I forget to connect something properly or to insert a cable here, they have a real problem at the next station.
Not only the cables come from the in-house manufacturer. All hydraulic lines and pipes of all kinds are produced here in the factory. Everything from 6 to 120 millimeters can be bent on these machines. The biggest pipes installed in the vehicle, the exhaust pipes, are also produced here. They have a diameter of 12 centimeters. Producing so many parts in-house offers a crucial advantage. If a modification is carried out on the vehicle, all parts can be immediately adapted. Next, the major assembly carrier is assembled. Later on, this frame will carry several cooling units. The main part is the cooler for the engine. Unlike on civilian vehicles, the cooler on the HX81 is not located at the front beneath the engine hood. Together with the other cooling units, it's mounted behind the cab, next to this major assembly carrier.
We've just fitted the cooler unit with the water cooler, charge air cooler, compressed air cooling, steering cooling, and the oil cooler.
So, there are 5 coolers and 5 different cooling circuits. On the line, the entire major assembly is now being mounted on the chassis. The workers use a crane for this because the complete major assembly carrier, filled with fluids, now weighs around 550 kilograms. There are several reasons why the cooling unit is installed behind the cab. Above all, it makes the HX81 considerably more maneuverable when it's deployed off-road.
When you ford rivers with a vehicle, it can happen that you drive into muddy terrain on exiting and that the cooler becomes bent. Another issue is that you intake the dust kicked up by the vehicle in front when driving in convoys in desert-like conditions and accordingly damage your cooling system. Also, a front cooler is mounted lower down and reduces the ramp angles accordingly.
The marriage is imminent. This is what the men and women at the plant call the process of joining and assembling the engine and the chassis. The gigantic V8 diesel engine is from the MAN plant in Nuremberg. It has a displacement of 16.3 liters and an output of 680 horsepower. With its transmission, it weighs 3 tons, exactly the same as a female African elephant.
Here we've fitted the biggest engine that MAN offered us. It's a V8 engine with 500 kilowatts and an output of 2,700 Newton meters. This is really big, and this engine also complies with the Euro 5 emissions standard.
To compare, at 2,700 Newton meters of torque, the V8 engine's output is roughly the same as 20 smart engines together. The cab now only has to pass one final test. Then it can head off to the assembly line and be mounted. In this final check, the cab's imperviousness is tested. Firstly, it should be watertight, and secondly, it should also prevent dangerous warfare agents from entering the interior.
Then the whole thing is examined in detail. We look at every point and check whether something might be leaking somewhere.
Water must not enter anywhere. The cab has to withstand 20 minutes of constant rain from every direction. Not a single drop is permitted to enter the interior through the seals. Only then is it clear whether the cab can proceed to the assembly line.
We've done the test, everything's okay. We'll push the cab to the next station where a couple of small parts will be fitted. Then it's directly off to the line to be mounted.
The engine is the heart, but the cab is the brain. An unprotected cab weighs almost 1,500 kilos, as much as a compact car. 2 employees now lift the cab over the chassis using a crane and set it down carefully. A new giant towing vehicle is born. Soon, it will be started for the first time, and the HX81 will be brought to life. But before the engine is cranked up, water, oil, and all hydraulic fluids have to be checked once again. Then, the 16.3-liter V8 diesel is allowed to roar gently.
Der Optimalfall ist,
Optimally, the vehicle leaves production line 3 without any issues.
The HX81 now leaves the shop under its own steam for the first time. But the towing vehicle still has a long way to go before it can be delivered. The first port of call is the plant's internal test stand. Once the vehicle data has been registered in the system, the dynamometer is automatically set up for the HX81. Then, the truck faces its first real stress test. If it fails, it's back to the assembly line. Because the test takes place in a shop, the exhaust gases have to be suctioned off. To do this, an extractor is positioned over the exhaust pipes. First, the engine is warmed up before being taken to its limits. The rollers in the floor break the wheels and thereby simulate gradients and extreme situations for the vehicle.
I'm now driving maximum speed. The vehicle's empty. Going full throttle, it's got to work.
Theoretically, the 680 horsepower truck can do 100 kilometers per hour, but it's cut off at 89. Not very fast, but it isn't designed for high speeds. The HX81 is all about pure power.
If there's an unusual noise, then your ears prick up. And you figure out what's going on.
Once the engine test has been passed, the HX81 is rewarded with the rest of its camouflage patches. These are painted on according to a camouflage patch pattern that is different for each model. The shape and position of each patch are standardized and defined precisely for each vehicle. There are a total of 67 such templates for the HX81.
The templates are numbered so we can work according to the plan, and the S here stands for black. In the revised camouflage colors, black paint is also called tar black and brown is called leather brown.
All areas that are to be given a camouflage patch are sanded so that the paint can better adhere to the surface. Then the roughly 3-hour painting process is carried out. The colors differ depending on the customer's country. Australian units are lighter than German vehicles, for example.
The Australian colors are far lighter because it's more sandy mountain terrain. And the German colors are far darker, of course, because of the woods. It's to make them invisible.
Only model plates are masked off. They mustn't be painted over. The tolerance for the patches is less than 2 centimeters, which is why the painters also use a special spray gun.
This gun extensively reduces spray mist. Instead, you can paint fantastic transitions. You can do virtually anything with it up to sharp angles.
Once the camouflage patches are dry, the towing vehicle proceeds to the final shop. This is where wheel alignment takes place. The HX81 is equipped with a dual front axle that is steered and driven in parallel. This firstly enables maximum off-road mobility and secondly, also maximum power. To achieve this, the axles have to be adjusted perfectly, which is why only the plant's most experienced employees work here.
The employees in my department tend to be people who've been at the company for a long time and are familiar with the product and have a lot of experience.
Each component has to be checked by at least 2 colleagues or a vehicle doesn't leave the plant. And not without a vehicle toolkit, of course. Every customer has its own requirements in this regard. The German armed forces rely on an extensive repair set.
This is a 10-meter-long tire inflator hose, so you can reinflate the tires using your own vehicle if there's a problem with the pressure. Certain equipment sets, spare bulbs, a standard set, a flashlight, a warning triangle, of course, everything you need.
It's now masked one last time so that it can be coated with a preservative. After all, some vehicles still face a journey of several months by ship to the other end of the world before being deployed. Plastic and rubber parts are masked. The corrosion protection is then applied on the chassis and the undercarriage and coats the vehicle like a protective cover. Then the vehicle is taken to final assembly again. The delivery inspection is due. The workers check once more whether everything is on board, and the 4 enormous vehicle batteries are charged again. If all stickers and labels are attached to the vehicle, the HX81 is good to go. "40 days have passed. 1,400 people have taken part in its production, and HX81 costs almost 800,000 euros. The Leopard transporter is finished. Each year, between 25 and 50 units leave the plant in Vienna, but that could change soon. Because a new vehicle is ready and waiting. The base model for the HX81 is the HX2, and a successor vehicle is already being planned for it, the HX3. What is still in the prototype stage at present is scheduled to enter series production soon. Thanks to new technologies, the military truck is being completely redesigned. It's aimed at offering soldiers around the world even better protection, thanks to a newly designed cab. At first glance, these pictures are more reminiscent of trucks from the Transformers series than military trucks. At present, 3 prototypes have been built and are on tour around the world for trade shows and demonstrations. One of these prototypes is planned with a mobile cannon, which will transform the road-capable truck into an extremely mobile artillery unit. A 155mm cannon is fitted in the current stage of development. Further weapons systems are being planned. This will make the HX3 a real alternative to heavy-tracked vehicles, because it offers strategic advantages that no other artillery system achieves, thanks to the combination of its off-road capability and on-road mobility. It's simply faster, quieter, and more maneuverable than many tanks. The second prototype is a logistics unit with a fully automatic swap loading system for containers. This enables large loads to be quickly relocated to the operating location without the driver having to disembark. The third prototype is designed as a carrier for new long-range radar systems. The HX3 will therefore be shedding its role as a pure logistics vehicle in the future. The HX3 will additionally be equipped with active protection systems, such as those already fitted on the Survivor armored vehicle. The ROSI system is a 40mm decoy system. It was developed specifically to give smaller vehicles cover. For instance, in the event of an attack with armor-piercing projectiles, a wall of smoke is established in fractions of a second, thereby making the vehicle invisible to targeted attacks and enabling it to escape. Besides the conventional camouflage, the new vehicle generation will also be equipped with a new digital camouflage mode. If necessary, all transmission and reception functions can be deactivated to reduce the vehicle's digital signature. It's the German Armed Forces' most powerful towing vehicle, the The HX81 is a truck-sized off-road vehicle. With 680 horsepower and its 8-wheel drive, it can cope with any terrain. It's over 10 meters long and weighs 23 tons. The German Armed Forces call it the Elephant. The Austrian Armed Forces call it the Heavy Load Transport System 70 tons. Around 50 units leave the assembly plant in Vienna each year. With a semi-trailer, it can transport tanks of all kinds. Its permissible gross vehicle weight is then 130 tons. With its dual winch system, it can recover and transport the biggest and heaviest tanks. Everything about the HX81 is bigger and stronger than on any other towing vehicle. Its task is to transport and recover heavy equipment with no compromise and without fanfare.